Welcome back, everybody. Again, right now, I'm going to be introducing our next presenter, and this program is called "Managing Money: A Caregiver's Guide to Finances." I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Josh Sroka, who is a native Rhode Islander and currently resides in Southern Rhode Island with his wife Sherry and his four children. He received his law degree from Roger Williams University, his bachelor's degree from Clark University, and is admitted in the practice of law in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and as well as the United States District Court of Rhode Island. The United States District Court here in Rhode Island. Josh is also a volunteer community educator for the Alzheimer's Association, and he is presenting today for the first time the Alzheimer's Association's newest core program, which he will be sharing with you this morning. Josh, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. You hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you for that intro. I appreciate that. And thank
Absolutely.
you for having me. Well, let me start out by welcoming everyone here. I am, again, Joshua Sroka. I'm an attorney, law attorney located in South Kingstown, Rhode Island, office actually in Wakefield. And I'm here to present this next section called Managing Money: A Caregiver's Guide to Finances. So this is an Alzheimer's Association education program. And, of course, I'm here as a community educator. You do know that I'm sure that the Rhode Island chapter of Alzheimer's Association is located at 245 West Waterman Street in Providence, Rhode Island. And, of course, they can be reached at alz.org/RI. So this program is designed or for people who provide care for someone living with Alzheimer's, another dementia, or even any chronic illness. Throughout today's program, you're going to see videos from dementia care experts as well as real caregivers. We'll also go through a number of activities that will help you create a financial plan. You'll find these activities along with the participant's guide with all of the slides from today's presentation in your handouts. In today's program, you're going to see some general information on legal, financial, and medical issues. It is important to note, we want to stress this, that the information is not meant to take place of financial advice. We do encourage you to seek the advice of legal, financial, medical personnel before you act on any of the information in the program today. Laws change from state to state, and not only that, they change constantly. So it's always good to check in with those professionals and experts on that stuff before taking a dive into a lot of this stuff. One little piece of housekeeping here is before we will get started, the Alzheimer's Association would like to acknowledge and thank the following organizations for participating in the steering committee that assisted in developing today's program. Those steering committee members offered their expertise before, certainly, and during, and really after the program creation, reviewing all the materials presented today and making sure that everything is accurate and inclusive. So we really do appreciate their valuable support. So our goal for today is to give you the information so that by the end of today's program, you will be able to describe how caregiving affects finances, list the legal and financial documents that caregivers should have in place, prepare useful discussions about financial decisions and planning, importantly, to identify steps to lower the chances of financial abuse or fraud, and then begin to create a backup plan in the event that you as the caregiver may not be able to provide that type of care that you want to do on a consistent basis. We all have families and lives that we're trying to juggle as well. So to have that backup plan is always a very good idea. So, and one more thing before we get started, I'm going to be using a few key phrases and terms today and we'll just kind of review those. Some may be a little more self-explanatory than others, but I figure let's just run through those two, if you will. So the word caregiver, so that's going to describe a family member, friend, or legal guardian who supports somebody with their health needs and well-being. Caregiving often includes assistance with activities of daily living, for instance, bathing and dressing. They can also include activities like paying bills, shopping, or managing money. Some of you may also hear or prefer the term care partner, which is often used to describe someone who supports a person living with Alzheimer's in maybe the early stages of the disease, when the person might be able to do most of the activities with little to no help. For example, they may pay their own bills or take care of their money, but they may still benefit from the help of a family member or a friend. The word finances, will, of course, that's going to refer to money and, most important, things that actually are worth money, right? So other assets as well. So it's going to include household cash flow, bank accounts, credit cards, loans, insurance policies, maybe retirement plans, things of that nature. Financial literacy, well, that means understanding how to manage money, such as handling the day-to-day expenses, how to plan for the future. It's really the ability to make those informed decisions and effective decisions about money. Before we begin, are there any questions before we jump in? We're ready to go. So one thing, so to start out with, the cost of caregiving, our financial decisions and actions can have a significant impact on our lives, both now and in the future. Financial literacy is especially important for caregivers, no matter which illness the person they care for is living with, because it really provides them with the knowledge and the skills needed to better support themselves and others. So just to quiz you guys a little bit right here, we have a question for you, and don't worry, I'm not going to call on anybody for an answer on this. So just an ask a question here. So next slide, please, will give us our question. I want to check your knowledge here. And actually, if you're so inclined, you may put your answer in the comment section if you're so inclined to do so. But so the question here is, what percentage of caregivers do you think have out-of-pocket costs as a result of caregiving? So we have four choices there: 47%, 67%, 78%, and 95%. So I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. And the correct answer on this actually is 78%, which is probably a bit of a surprise for most of us. According to an AARP report, more than 3/4 of caregivers have out-of-pocket costs as a result of caregiving. So this can include household expenses like maybe helping make mortgage payments or helping out with home modifications for access in the home, medical expenses like co-payments, medical equipment, and certainly travel to doctor's offices, for appointments and stuff like that. Certainly gas is not cheap, right? So that can add up quicker than people realize. So caregiving can impact the finances in a number of ways. Because the intensive amount of time that people spend providing care, caregiving may affect that person's employment. Many caregivers will end up maybe cutting their hours, taking time off, maybe retiring early, or even quitting their jobs. Okay? And these decisions can mean lost income, more debt, maybe difficulty saving for their own retirement or cutting back on their own costs, which makes things, it's an added layer of things to deal with. And many people just don't realize how expensive it can be to take care of others. So we have a video here that we want to show just to give us a real life example of that.
So some of the sacrifices I've had to make financially due to having to care for my mom were things like paying for some of her care, doctor visits in some cases, clothing, to try to limit the spend down of her money. So I supplemented where I could. and then retired early, which impacted my income to continue to care for her, and then looking into getting a part-time job to supplement her memory care, facility care.
So not only do we have those financial concerns, but there also can be an impact on that caregiver's own health due to the high levels of burden, just exhaustion, and even the uncertainty and stress. Okay? A lot of times caregivers may put off taking care of their own needs by skipping medical appointments, not getting enough sleep, ignoring symptoms of physical or mental health conditions. When caregivers don't take care of themselves, their own health can get worse, and that's only going to lead to additional medical expenses. So how does Alzheimer's disease affect the finances? So jumping right in, every illness brings different medical, emotional, and financial challenges for a caregiver. But caring for a person with Alzheimer's or another dementia can be particularly expensive. I'm going to test you guys again on your knowledge, so we're going to take a moment and we're going to go to the next question here. So it's true or false? And again, I'm not going to pick on anybody, so don't worry. So do you think that Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process? True or false? So the answer to this is false. Alzheimer's is a progressive and fatal brain disease. Symptoms usually develop slowly and get worse over time, becoming severe enough to affect daily tasks. While the greatest known risk for Alzheimer's is increasing age, the disease is not normally a normal part of aging. Most individuals with the disease are 65 and older. After age 65, the risk of developing Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. And after 85, the risk is about 1 in 3. So we'll test your knowledge again. We'll jump to another question here. And the next question is, true or false, Alzheimer only affects a person's memory? A couple seconds to think about that one. So this one is also false. Alzheimer's impacts a person's memory, their thinking, and their behavior. It also affects their ability to manage money. In fact, studies show that trouble managing bills and other financial problems can sometimes be an early sign of dementia. So this is another important reason why it's important to understand how the disease impacts finances. Alzheimer's disease usually progresses slowly through 3 stages: early, middle, and late. In the medical setting, they usually refer to that as mild, moderate, and severe. So the symptoms of Alzheimer's will worsen over time, although the rate at which the disease progresses varies from person to person. On average, a person with Alzheimer's lives 4 to 8 years after diagnosis, but some people live as many 20 years or more, depending on other factors. As the person advances through the disease, their care needs increase, and so does the cost of providing care. In the beginning, people living with Alzheimer's may start to have trouble managing their own money or even remembering to pay bills. And as the disease gets worse, they may no longer be able to communicate their wishes to family or friends or make those important decisions about financial or legal issues. And of course, many people will avoid financial planning because just thinking about it brings a lot of anxiety and fear, and there's a lot of stress in sort of preparing and thinking about future costs and things of that nature. So people will tend to put that off. But early planning is especially important for a person living with Alzheimer's or another dementia, because it allows them to participate in decisions about finances for the future. The financial impact of Alzheimer's disease on caregivers can be twofold. As we already discussed, many caregivers will experience financial problems because they have to reduce their hours or take time from work. But as the disease progresses, the caregivers will need to pay for services and support for that person living with Alzheimer's. We have another video here that will give us some firsthand experience on what that is like.
So when we finally moved into assisted living, when we first got the cost, it was going to be $5,000 a month. When we started adding on daily medications and housekeeping and all the other things that come with it, we were quickly at $6,000 per month. In my mind, every month I was, doing the calculations of, all right, how much money does Dad have left? How long can this last? What happens when that goes away?
All right. So caregiving for a person with Alzheimer's or another dementia poses unique challenges as well. Okay, not only the financial for the cost of giving that care, but caregivers will spend on an average more than $11,000 a year out of pocket for caregiving costs. So that's nearly twice as much as non-dementia caregivers. These challenges, along with the stresses of caregiving, can lead to increased depression and anxiety for the caregiver. 30 to 40% of caregivers for people living with dementia experience depression, while 44% have anxiety. And because about 2/3 of the dementia caregivers are women, they will often are really more often are more likely to experience this type of stress of caregiving. I want to give you some more introduction about how caregivers face these unique challenges with the video, but we're going to just give you one more question here before we jump into that. And that question here is, do you think people younger than 65 can develop Alzheimer's? True and false on here. How many people think that's true? And how many people might think that's false? Well, the answer to this is true. While older age is the greatest risk factor for Alzheimer's, and most individuals living with dementia are older adults, people younger than 65 can also develop Alzheimer's. This form of the disease is known as younger onset Alzheimer's, sometimes called early onset. And people living with younger onset Alzheimer's and their caregivers will face additional financial challenges, because many of these individuals report losing or quitting one or even more jobs prior to the diagnosis because of the cognitive changes that affected them at work. As a result, those individuals are not able to maximize benefits from those employers, such as disability insurance, family and medical leave act protections, or continued healthcare coverage through COBRA. People living with younger onset Alzheimer's and their care partners ultimately have less time to plan for the future, including saving for retirement. Those care partners face unique challenges because of their age and their stage in life. These care partners may have to return to work, maybe increase their hours or get another job to make up for that loss of income, while still taking care of all the other family responsibilities. This is especially true if that person living with the disease worked a job that provided most of the financial support for the family. Many of the care partners still have children at home and face increasing costs associated with raising a family. Because of the financial strain of the disease, they may no longer be able to start or continue saving for the child's education or other expenses, even family trips and hobbies, things like that. So it can really infringe on a lot of that stuff. And due to their age, these care partners may still have financial obligations that maybe somebody older does not. Things like mortgages, car payments, loans or debt, possibly even student loans for some people. And many of the resources that are out there for assistance and support a lot of times will require the individual with the disease to be 65 or older to qualify. So that makes it also a little bit tricky. There is a 2-year waiting period between when a person is placed on Social Security disability, what we know as SSDI, and when a person is actually eligible for the program, for Medicare. In the meantime, the person living with the younger onset Alzheimer's has to secure other health insurance coverage, which we know is not cheap. So this can impact the entire family if the individual certainly was the primary insurance carrier. And let's look at another group of caregivers who face additional challenges. Okay? Members of the LGBTQ community are more likely to be single. They often live alone and are less likely to have children. So this might mean that these individuals have a smaller support network, which can prevent difficulties as Alzheimer's progresses, since that person living with disease will eventually need someone else to take over, paying the bills and making financial decisions for them. It is important to remember that the LGBTQ community, the members of that community will need to have financial plans in place, because it helps to make sure that caregivers who are not relatives or family members may need access to that person's money when that person needs help managing it. So putting that stuff in place for them is certainly crucial. People with lower income, those households may be less likely to be financially prepared for cost of caregiving. In our next portion here, the low income section here. And then, and this is because they may be unemployed, or maybe they have a part-time job or a low-paying job that's less likely to offer, good retirement benefits that allows them to really save up for the future. They may be already struggling to make ends meet, so having this additional burden is going to put more of a stress on resources, make it more difficult to pay monthly bills, cover medical expenses, things like that. It may lead them to maybe taking out additional loans or debts, credit card, things like that, which is only going to exacerbate the problem, give more, wind up giving a person more stress in that situation with more bills, more debt. Certainly, that added stress is what we're trying to avoid. So planning early and making these plans is only going to help these families. So there are programs out there for families with limited income, so they may qualify for services out there at either no cost or reduced rates. Certainly, anybody at the Alzheimer's Association can be reached out to get resources, give you resources about where to go for those things. The next area we want to touch on are the benefits of early planning. So we want to talk about what we can do to avoid those financial strains on the caregiver. And we're going to do another knowledge check here. So we have back to our multiple choice question here on this one. So who do you think can benefit from putting financial plans in place for the future? We have 5 choices here. So first choice, people with lots of money, investments and stocks, maybe people who are retiring soon, caregivers, low-income households, or last choice, everyone. I'll give you a minute to think about that one. So the answer to this one is actually everyone. Many people assume that financial planning is only helpful for people who make a lot of money. But really, everybody can benefit from putting financial plans in place, especially those who are living with or caring for someone with a disease or chronic illness. Financial planning can help ensure that care costs will be covered and prevent financial hardships in the future. So there are benefits of putting financial plans in place as soon as possible for both the person receiving the care and for the caregiver. And some of these benefits include, knowing exactly what that person's wishes are. The caregiver is going to feel more confident about making important decisions when the person they're caring for can no longer make them. Maybe knowing how to handle financial issues and pay for care. There's less chance of making a costly or unwise decision, such as maybe taking money from a life insurance policy, stopping an insurance payment. We see that happen sometimes when people are not sure what to do with that, or cashing in a 401k or retirement accounts too early. That's an area that, again, we always stress to, speak with a financial advisor on that. Make sure they know what you're doing there and why you're doing it, because you can get tripped up with a lot of tax laws there. So we want to be careful while we step into that arena. So to talk a little more on this, we're going to listen to a caregiver and a dementia care expert. On the next video here.
One of the benefits of putting financial plans in place for caregivers is simply peace of mind. Oftentimes we have a lot of anxiety and fear about the unknown. How long is the disease going to last? What are the care needs going to be? When we think of all of those things that we might be apprehensive about, and we put plans in place for, if this happens, here's how we'll handle it. And we really think through, here's what's typical with the disease, here's what I need to be thinking about, and here's my plan for that. It can be such a gift to the whole family because people can settle in and focus on, here's what I need to focus on today, here's what I need to think about right now, without the weight of the what ifs hanging over their head.
In our next video from a caregiver.
My mother, by putting plans in place early, that really helped me because it gives me a sense of confidence that I'm doing the things that she really wants to be done. It allows me to not have to worry about decisions that I make because my mother has already laid out the plan. She's stated her wishes, and my role is really to execute those plans. I have found that making decisions for my own situation can often be difficult. And so it's even harder to make decisions, especially when it comes to medical decisions, financial decisions. To have that responsibility of making those decisions for someone else can be very, very difficult. So in that my mother was so prepared and had laid out financial plans and really had a structure around her life, that has really allowed me to be less anxious as I perform the caregiving role.
Yeah, I think both of those videos are great because they really kind of bring home two important points. One is that when somebody prepares ahead of time, they are providing that peace of mind for themselves and for their family and their caregiver. And that peace of mind is invaluable. The other thing that it points out is that it gives that caregiver the confidence to act and do all those things that they know the person wants done. There's no second guessing. There's a roadmap, and that person is just following the roadmap that's been laid out, and that makes it a lot easier to deal with everything. Just the everyday stuff. Not only that, but even just the stress and the anxiety of dealing with all of that stuff. So, really the benefits of the early planning give you the ability to share exactly what someone wants to happen and how they want those decisions made in the future. And it gives that sense of reassurance because others know the wishes and they're going to follow them because they're just going to follow that roadmap. And that feeling of relief that comes from having all of that stuff in place, knowing that the plan is in place, again, gives that caregiver the confidence to know that I just have to follow the plan. I know what that person wants, and it just makes it easier to go forward. So one more video here just to touch on on this subject.
One benefit of planning early for the person with the disease is that they get to have their say. They get to say, here is how I want things to play out. If there's ever a time when I can't live alone or when I need this kind of care, here's how I'd like that to happen. Here's who I want to be making decisions on my behalf if I can't make them for myself. So they get to have their say. In addition, they get to make choices about how they live their life, what they do now and in the months and years to come, with this additional knowledge of, hey, I've got this disease and here's what I can expect. And so a lot of people tell us that they choose differently, and they choose differently from each other. I talked to one person with Alzheimer's who said, you know what? I want every day to be regular. I want to work in my flower beds. I want to play with my grandkids. I want to have lunch with a friend. I just want lots of great regular days. I've talked to other folks with dementia diseases who said, I want to do the things I've been looking forward to. I want to take some big trips, or I want to do some really special things with the people I'm close to. So it's not the same for everybody, but the person with the disease gets to make choices and gets to live life more on their terms.
Yeah, and that's another great point in that video, that it's all about choices. If you want to have the ability to make those choices, then setting that plan in place allows you to do that. So making the plan gives you the ability to make your own choices as to how things are going to go when you're not able to make those choices. No one else is going to be making those choices for you. So certainly being prepared gives you that ability to do that. So the next area we're going to cover will be the conversations about finances. And this is one that gets a little tricky sometimes. A lot of this stuff is easier said than done, and we know that. But we're going to give you some tips and some tools to work with in this area to help you navigate that. So jumping into this, we know that conversations about money are always difficult to get started with people. Even people who are comfortable managing their own money, they may have difficulty discussing finances with someone else. So it's a tricky area. People often get anxious and uncomfortable when speaking about money. So it's really kind of hard to know how to start these conversations, but here are some tips and some tools to make the experience a little more positive and productive. So to feel more confident when discussing finances, it might be helpful to do these things. Maybe write down your goals and what financial documents you want to discuss. Identify maybe the family members or close friends that should be part of the discussion. And this works the other way too. Sometimes there may be some family members that shouldn't be part of the discussion. So knowing who to be there, who should be there rather, is important. Who knows maybe the finances more, maybe who knows the medical situation a little bit more or less. That's certainly a factor. This is something that I didn't actually think about, until recently either, but like the time of day that you speak with people, and make sure that's a quiet place. That's something that can help reduce the stress or the anxiety for really everyone involved. Encouraging the person to be honest about their assets and expenses. Sometimes it's tough, the older person might want to sort of keep that close to the chest and not really give that information out. So that's one of those. It's a little easier said than done, but having this conversation and approaching it in this way will make it easier to get there, especially if you don't rush through the process. Really important to take your time. This is a sort of like baby steps type of thing. Any movement forward is great progress, and just know that it's going to take some time to kind of plow through this stuff, and that's just the way it is. But try to be patient with it, certainly. It's hard for someone probably to let go of that whole process of letting go and having someone else sort of take control of things, especially someone with dementia. You might want to ask that person, what their wishes are, what they're looking to do for the future. What do they see, as how things are going to progress. The next thing that we probably want to have you talk about is maybe explaining to them that, I want to know what it is that you want so that I'm able to be sure that I can honor those wishes. Certainly don't make any judgments on that person about their past decisions. Everyone handles money differently. The goal really is to make sure we look forward and not so much back in this process. Just trying to come up with an agreement on how that person's money is going to be managed going forward, when they're unable to do so. If somebody has difficulty communicating, sometimes it's helpful to use shorter sentences and use simple terms. I'm a big fan of using simple terms. I'm a big fan of plain English. I try not to get into all the legal terminology when people come to see me. I think it just muddles the water and so trying to deal with it on a very basic level is the best way to approach it and not get too technical. I think one of the other important things to do when you're having the discussions with people like this is to repeat what they say, repeat back what they say. Say, well, so what I'm hearing is you're saying, X, Y, and Z. Am I understanding you correctly? So that sort of assures them that not only are you hearing them, but you're really listening to them, and understand what it is they're trying to tell you. And again, that'll assure them that you have their best interests in mind. If the conversation becomes stressful, take a break, walk away, don't push it. There's no reason to. You have time to deal with things. Just take a break, come back to it, whenever you can. Again, like I said, Rome wasn't built in a day. This is a process. Always try to end it on a positive note if you can. Again, these things are difficult to approach. So, take your time and try to end them on a positive note. If everything's not done, or if you feel like you need to follow up, do that. Try to do that on a regular basis. And depending on the situation, that could mean monthly, that could mean maybe quarterly, or yearly, but do make sure you check in, because, as things progress, the person's needs and care is going to change, the level of care and cost of care. So you want to make sure that you're meeting those needs and those financial needs as well. So, having those conversations is important. This is another great video on some tips on what worked well for this woman caring for her mom. This next video here.
Advice I'd have for other caregivers if the conversation about finances doesn't go well at first is to keep trying. It took a while for my mom to come around, and I was exasperated. I would try to catch her at a good moment, and sometimes she'd give me a little tidbit here or there, so it might take time to just pull it all together. It's sort of trying to understand the moment if you're having a good time. What I did also was to bring up friends. My mother was very empathetic. So if I'd say, oh, remember so-and-so? They had a situation with their mom or dad or family member where something happened and the person didn't know what to do, or they didn't have understanding about it. So that was really hard on them. She'd say, oh, really? And I'd say, yeah, see, that would help me if, we talked about that kind of thing. And that would usually get her. So in my case, that empathy is what I would kind of try to use for her to open up more, but continuing to do it, catching on a good day. That was key, because it took time and it was piecemeal. Small victories, just get as much as you can over time and keep at it, because there usually will be a window where you can kind of break through, or in some cases it might be someone else has to talk to them.
So good advice there. The important thing is to try to build that person up. Maybe you can start the conversation with them with something like, I've always admired the way you've handled your finances. I want to learn more about how you do that and what works well for you, so I can, do the same thing. Or maybe something like, I've noticed you seem worried about finances these days. What's worrying you the most? What can I help with? Those people who are, like I said, want to keep it a little closer to the chest, you might want to say something like, oh, I respect your privacy, but it would give me peace of mind to know that there's a financial plan in place so that I can follow your wishes, and I know that I'm doing what you want me to do. So if you're the person, starting the conversation, maybe about your own finances, and you have to approach family members about it, you want to start that conversation yourself. Maybe something like, I want to talk to you about my finances, so you can access them in the event of an emergency. Or, I really want you to understand my wishes in the future, so let's talk about how I'd like things managed. Those are great ways to start that conversation there in that slide there. So we have an activity here. So if in your worksheet, actually in your handout, there's a worksheet there, and it's called having conversations about finances. So on this worksheet, it's going to walk you through all the steps I just described, including your goals for the conversation, the financial documents you want to review or discuss, the people who should be involved in the conversation, and again, that best time and place to talk. We're not going to go through this line by line, have you fill it all out right now, but there may be something that pops up in your mind right now after the discussion we've had already. You might want to jot a few notes down on there before we move to the next slide within the next section. So certainly some good things to think about there on that. All right, so our next section is going to deal with financial abuse and fraud. Unfortunately, this does have a major impact on older adults, and especially with those living with dementia. And I'm going to check your knowledge here on this one again as we dive into this section. So a question here is, on average, when a person age 80 or older becomes a victim of financial abuse, fraud, or scams, how much money do you think they lose? Is it $5,200, $10,500, $15,700, or $39,200? You guys think the answer to that one is? I was actually pretty surprised on this one too. So unfortunately, the answer to this one is, on average, it's about $39,200. Studies show that financial exploitation is the most common form of elder abuse, and yet only a small fraction of these incidences are actually reported. And this can be a pretty tough area to manage, but there are the financial crimes against Americans. Is really a growing problem in this country, and we see that abuse that really occurs everywhere, including the home and care settings as well. Most states do have laws on the books that make financial elder abuse a crime. But people living with dementia are especially at high risk of becoming a victim of fraud or financial abuse, because they really may not be aware of the fact that they're being taken advantage of, and they probably won't report the fact that they have been taken advantage of, even if they do realize it, for many reasons, just being embarrassed or something like that, right? So, as memory and other thinking skills decline, they may struggle to make good financial decisions, and that will make them even more susceptible to or vulnerable to scams and fraud. So again, we're going to listen to an expert on this on our next slide. Touch on this topic for us a little bit.
People living with dementia are more susceptible perhaps to fraud and financial abuse than other people because they have a disease that's attacking their brain. And so their ability to solve problems, to think about things logically, to have insight may be impaired, and they may be able to be tricked by people they trust or people who seem nice or seem trustworthy in a way that they wouldn't have been at an earlier time.
So moving on to our next slide, we want to talk about some signs or things that you may notice that would clue you in that the person may be having some problems with money or, potentially being taken advantage of. And first one is, maybe there's a pile of unopened bills. You'll see that. Maybe you'll see electricity, gas, and utilities in general being shut off because the bills weren't paid. Maybe there are some unusual or large purchases. Maybe buying the same thing, more than once, or even buying something that they really don't need. Say they buy dog food, but they don't have a dog, something like that. Giving money to telemarketers, random telemarketers doing it often. Maybe sending money in the mail would be one, or even making multiple gifts to the same person or company. Things like that are tip-offs there. Then, of course, missing money, unexplained withdrawals from that person's bank account may also be an indication that there's an issue going on. But as a caregiver, there are some simple things that you can do to reduce that person's risk of financial abuse or fraud if can't be there, every minute. You should include that person in the discussion about how you're going to manage this and the safety measures you put in place. We want to make sure that they're part of the conversation so that they can be assured that things are going the way they want them to be, and they understand it and they're comfortable with it. You can suggest maybe a spending limit on a credit card, creating a separate account that maybe we keep a small amount of money in, and it's an agreed amount, and that's their spending money for the week, the month, or what have you, and whatever happens to that money happens to that money. It's out there for them to use. Gives them that freedom, but it's not going. The whole thing is spent on something. It's not really going to impact care and level of care and money that you need for that care. You can always, a lot of us do this nowadays. We set up the auto pay for bills. I know that's not always, maybe a lot of seniors aren't big fans of doing that, but it certainly can make it easier for you to manage accounts and pay bills. Signing up to receive automatic notifications for withdrawals from the bank accounts would be a great way to sort of keep an eye on things. You can always request electronic bank and credit card statements. That way you can watch for any unusual purchases, because at a short time you'll realize what's the normal spending, and anything odd will just sort of pop out or jump out at you. Certainly making sure that they are on the do not call list would be a great idea. Most people are on at this point now, but that is donotcall.gov. Make sure that that's on. Again, that's donotcall.gov. You can always ask credit card companies to maybe stop sending those balance transfer checks. And you can certainly ask them, to opt out of any of those future solicitations. So just eliminating that stuff right at the beginning, sort of nipping it at the bud. That way the potential isn't out there for things to happen. So in your handouts, you're going to find a sheet that's titled Avoiding Financial Abuses and Fraud. So we'll take a quick peek at that. And So,
So one of
this
the things that
works.
I did, my father was very proud. He really didn't want to admit that he had Alzheimer's. So I wanted him to be able to to continue to feel good about himself. So I actually set up a checking savings account for him that was joint with me. Because again, I had power of attorney, so I could move things around a bit. I made sure that he always had $200 in that account. Everything else was protected, and he really didn't have access to it anymore. But he didn't know that because he still had that $200. A couple of years into his diagnosis, he actually had somebody stop at his home. He was outside working in his yard. They came by, a couple, old car, and pulled up to the driveway. They had a child with them and said their child was ill. And they said they needed money for health care for this child. My father was always very generous as he became older and as he became more impaired with Alzheimer's. He became more generous. And so his inclination was to help this couple. They took him to the credit union. They asked him to withdraw all of his funds. So he did. He had access to that $200 that he knew about, and he gave it to them. They left him there in the parking lot, and he walked home. So it was really awful that that happened to him, but his money was protected because of the safeguards that we had put up. Everything else was still there, and I was able to replace that $200. So we tried very hard to do everything we could to protect him financially, but also to make sure that we didn't take away his sense of self-esteem.
Yeah, so you see from that video that that's a great way to handle the situation. And again, it may take a little more discussion and convincing to do something like that, but it certainly can be invaluable once set up. And that's a great example of how it worked really well. So again, I refer to the worksheet that's in the materials as well here, and that's going to give you the the list of steps that you can take to if you suspect that there is fraud or abuse. You can refer to that again. Go through that as you need. Just keep in mind that it's all pretty much one step at a time, and each thing that you do is going to make a difference in the long run. So again, one thing at a time, certainly. And all right, so moving on from that, from financial abuse, how we doing? Anybody have any questions? Or everyone okay with everything here so far? Andy, any questions for me? If we're good to go, we'll keep moving along here. So our next section will be identifying financial and legal needs. And this is one of those areas that many caregivers avoid, even just people avoid in general, making financial and legal plans. It can be stressful to think about the future, especially when you're caring for someone with a chronic illness. Jobs, family responsibilities, other duties, they make it hard to organize our own lives, and certainly adding someone else into the mix makes it a little more difficult. But as we discussed, it is important to put those plans in place as early as possible. And that way you can make the process easier, breaking it down into simple steps and just doing, one task at a time. And just working your way through it. We can look at these steps, and many of them you can complete, a lot of times without a financial advisor or attorney. But we'll jump in first, and our first step here in organizing finances and making a plan to recover the care costs is to look at income and spending. Okay. And we've also included a worksheet called Covering Care Costs. And that's in your handouts as well. So we're going to take a look at that. And on that first page, you're going to be writing down. Let's just run through here. Yeah, on that first page, you're going to write down, how much money comes into the account each month and how much goes out. The second page is a list of items to consider when adding up expenses in each category. And then the third page is once we have that overall budget, it can be helpful to see, where we can cut back on spending. And, you just go through and check those boxes as you see fit. And we'll jump back to our slide where we have our two caregiver. We have a caregiver and actually two caregivers to give us a little background on some things that they implemented in order to save money.
One thing that I would suggest is when you have those monthly bills is to call. I had cable and I said, hey, I can't pay this amount when I'm looking at all of the bills that we had. And they didn't want to lose me as a customer, so they reduced the cost of the cable. Also, the medical bills, even though you get a demand for payment for a certain amount of money, call them, go on the payment plan, talk to the hospital about a payment plan, talk to the different utilities. I was on a budget for heat. I was on a budget for electricity. Reach out and ask. And don't do all those calls at one day. Break it up and do one at a time so you don't get overwhelmed with it.
Keeping within a budget, the budget is really, really important for food, because it's very tempting to go into a grocery store and find all kinds of delicacies. So that's been a big change and a good one. We found that for the two of us, we were spending a lot of money on groceries. So taking a look at that is really helped.
Yeah, so two important things. The whole issue of payment plan certainly is important. If you find that you don't have the money each month, reach out to those companies. Do what you can to try to make a payment, even if you're making some type of payment and you can do it consistently, whatever that is. It's going to help. They're going to work with you. A lot of those places will. That's for sure. And then again, just stepping back, looking at a budget, realizing where money is going. Sometimes that's what it takes to really realize, where things are, and how you can sort of rein that in and take a couple steps back and keep a little more money in. So when we do, when we're in this process, we want to take inventory of the assets and the debts. And those assets are going to be anything owed that has a value, like a house, bank account, a car, or stocks, retirement accounts, things like that. And the debt, of course, is going to be anything that gets paid back over time: credit cards, loans, things of that nature. Right? Another important step in making a financial action plan is to identify those costs of care, both now and in the future. Keep in mind that medical and other kinds of insurance may pay for some of the costs, but it may not cover all of them. So when you're thinking about this, you should include things like the ongoing medical treatment, maybe prescription drugs, personal care supplies, adult day services, if those are needed, maybe in-home care services. And then, and one thing about that, actually, to point out though, if you're hiring a professional in-home caregiver, you may have to pay his or her Social Security or employment taxes. So keep that in mind. And then last is the cost of full-time care, and in a facility, having that full-time care, somebody coming into the home and providing that care. So given that Alzheimer's is a progressive disease, the caregivers will also eventually need to assume many of those ongoing financial responsibilities. For instance, paying bills, arranging for benefits on claims, maybe making investment decisions, and preparing tax returns. So, those last two, again, always good to reach out to the professionals, maybe the financial advisor and the accountant or CPA who's doing the taxes for that person. Reach out to them. Make sure you guys are on the same page. Reaching out to those people is really important to make sure that you have an understanding of what the plan was before and how it's supposed to be going forward. And it's also helpful to look into, other financial resources that could cover the cost of care. Some of these sources will include personal income, maybe a 401k or other retirement accounts, certainly savings accounts, any stocks, bonds, and even personal property. Know that there's federal funding such as Medicare Parts A, B, and D, and also veteran benefits. I think veteran benefits seem to sort of get overlooked a lot of times, I think. If someone is a veteran, if they were a wartime veteran, then they may be eligible to receive some other in-home care and services that a lot of people don't know about. So certainly if that person is a wartime veteran, there's actually a definition of a wartime veteran, and that means that someone who's actually actively served in a time of conflict. And those dates, they actually, I would just say check with the VA on those things, because the dates of the war don't always coincide with how long the benefits period will run for. So if you think someone was a wartime veteran, check it with the VA, because there may be stuff out there that this person will qualify for. And certainly if those people, gave their time and their life for the country, we want to make sure that they get, whatever benefits they can get. And then, state funding sources like Medigap and Medicaid, you'll certainly find all of those resources at benefitscheckup.org, which I believe is on the screen there as well. And certainly anybody at the Alzheimer's Association will be more than happy to help you find those resources. So in your handouts, there should be a brochure called Money Matters. So that has all the additional information about many of those funding resources that I just mentioned, along with phone numbers and websites that you can learn more from. As I mentioned, the Alzheimer's Association, their free 24/7 helpline at 800-272-3900. You reach out to that anytime. You'll speak with an expert who can help answer questions about any of those resources, or connect you with any of those support services that are out there. So when it comes to legal planning, you want to make sure that a trusted family member or friend can make decisions for a person living with a disease when they can no longer make those decisions. And as we discussed with making financial plans, it's certainly important to make legal plans as early as you can, so that everybody is prepared. Putting those legal plans in place doesn't have to be stressful or difficult. Know that if you reach out to an attorney who focuses their practice on elder law, they're here doing that type of work because it's what they love to do, and they're not going to think you're stupid for asking the question. We do this every day. We deal with it every day. We don't expect you to know it all, or any of it. So we'll do all the heavy lifting behind the scenes and help you get what you need. It's just invaluable to have that guidance and have that help to make sure that whatever you do decide is the best decision for that person and for you. And we're going to hear a video here from someone who did a little homework on their own and try to do some of that themselves and work forward and try to handle a lot of this stuff on her own in this next video.
Most of these resources you can access online. You can access from multiple different entities. And I did most of all of her documents that were necessary: the power of attorney, the living will, the healthcare power of attorney, the financial power of attorney. All of those things you can access, and you can get them notarized and legal documents created. So don't let that be a hindrance to take care of those items, because those items are really, really important early on in the disease. If you wait, it's only going to cause more problems. So the earlier you get it, the better. And don't be afraid of the nuances of all these documents and all these papers. It's pretty simplified if you research it. There's a really simple way to go about it and take care of it as soon as possible.
Yeah, certainly her stressing the fact that taking care of the stuff as early as possible, that can't be stressed enough, certainly. And as I cautioned people earlier here, when you're dealing with financial matters, to really make sure you speak with the financial advisor or speak with the accountant or CPA. I would also strongly encourage you to not go this alone, simply because this is, again, an area that is highly specialized. Not every state to state is the same, and people do get tripped up with what they find online sometimes. I know that, like, we literally just had an experience yesterday where a couple came in and said, well, we have, we did these things online here and we're all set, so we don't need those. And I reviewed them and they actually were not executed correctly. So we had to redo those for them. So we're actually in the process of redoing those for them so they'll be executed properly. So one other thing I want to touch on here. So, those documents in themselves, there's a few here. We have the durable power of attorney, both for finances and for healthcare, which are going to allow someone to make financial decisions for you and make healthcare decisions for you when you're unable to. And then the living will, and that one is your directive to your doctor that says, doctor, if I am terminal, I want you to remove life support. I want you to remove a feeding tube. Very important document because it makes it so that your family doesn't have to stand by your bedside and decide whether to pull the plug. You're making that decision ahead of time, so you're sort of taking that from them and not putting them in that position, which I think is really invaluable. So the next slide, you're going to see some suggestions for places where you can reach out and get these other resources here. If I may, I'd probably add to this list in the first section, looking for legal help. I would check with NALA, which is the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. They are at naela.org. I know that most of my colleagues here in Rhode Island are all members of that organization. It's a great organization, and all those attorneys, I would highly recommend any of them. I know most of them, great people, and that's a great resource. Certainly the Rhode Island Bar Association would be another one, which is ribar.com. There would also, if you need a referral to an attorney, or if you find an old document and you don't know if that attorney is still in business or not, you can locate that attorney on the Rhode Island Bar website. There's some tabs on there to find that stuff. So, kind of wrapping things up here, create this backup plan. When I create a plan for somebody, I have a backup plan. I always have. Maybe if someone has a power of attorney, I'm going to ask them to give me a couple people to work in succession. If that first person can't act, we're gonna go to that second person or the third. And I even draft it in such a way that even if all three of those people can't act, I have a backup to the backup plan. So backup plans are really crucial, mainly because if not even in the legal sense of things, just if you can't be there day to day to handle, the things you normally would do because you've got some conflicts with your own schedule, you're going to want to set up someone else to take care of those things for you and help you, help give that care that you were provided to that person, and try to disrupt the flow of things day to day as much as you can. So, speaking with members of the family, trying to get some other help, making sure that you have a detailed list of the medications and the doctors and things of that nature, so that if somebody does have to pop in, they have all that information at their fingertips. That can be invaluable at times. Most importantly, just don't be afraid to ask for help. This is a big task. Nobody should be going it alone. There's a lot of help out there. like I said, just don't be afraid to ask if you need help. And then, one of the other important things that we talked about this in the very beginning is make sure you take care of your own health. I mean, you're the caregiver. I sort of equate this to, being on the airplane and the mask comes down, the air mask comes down from the top of the plane. And they say, if you're traveling with children, put your mask on first, because if you don't put your mask on, then there's two people with no masks on potentially. So if you put your mask on, well, now you can help another. So we want you to be mindful of that. Stay active. Visit your doctors regularly, eat well, try to get yourself, removed from it and have that time to recharge, because we all need that, and that helps us just be better, better people every day when we can recharge and relax and take time to unwind. So that's really important. Keep in mind that the Alzheimer's Association is available wherever you need them. They have that 24/7 helpline. Again, 800-272-3900. You can reach out to somebody there anytime and get help with any of these things that we discussed here today. Help is available in over 200 languages, so don't let that be a barrier. I've already mentioned their website a number of times, but again, it's alz.org. That is oftentimes the place that most people start out this journey with. So, don't be afraid to get on the call and get that information or the help that you need. So I guess to close out, I'm just gonna ask you guys to sort of give an overview of everything that we looked at today and think about everything that we covered. And I know it's a lot to digest, and I don't expect you to get it all in one shot here. But I want you to take some time maybe to put down maybe one or two things that you can do, maybe in that activities packet, things that you can do right now, the next day or two. And don't make the list too long. Again, like I said, Rome wasn't built in a day. Take this piece by piece and do a little at a time. But if you can get something down there, like just completing the worksheet from today's presentation, that's going to take a big step. And give yourself, a pat on the back, because you're here and you're looking to make things, you're looking to make that plan. You're looking to be proactive, and that means a lot to those people that you're caring for. So thank you for your time, and I hope this helped.